In March 2023, gold prices hit the 60,000 rupees mark for the first time. Meaning, if you wanted to buy 10 grams of gold, you had to pay over 60,000 rupees. And the funny thing is that since then, gold prices have been going up and most people expect it to continue going up. So the real question is, what is driving the gold price rally and will it continue? Well, to understand this, you need to go back in time. On February 2022, the US and the European Union decided to do something completely unprecedented. On the face of Russian aggression in Ukraine, they decided to sanction the Russian central bank and they locked the country out of nearly $600 billion in foreign exchange reserves.
So today, I'm announcing the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia in response to their actions yesterday.
Now, if you don't understand what that means, let me explain. India currently has about $578 billion worth of foreign exchange reserves in US dollars, in euros, gold, etc. And we use this money to pay for basic import items like food, oil, gold, etc. And most of these reserves are actually held in banks and financial institutions outside the country. Now, imagine one day the US and the European Union decide to lock us out of nearly 70% of our reserves. It would cripple our economy. We would struggle to pay for even the most basic items. So when the US and its allies decided to lock Russia out of its own money, it sent shockwaves across the world because every country was thinking, if they can do it to Russia, what's stopping them from doing it to us? What's stopping them from locking us out of our own money? The thing is, even though this story is pretty much accurate, it misses one key detail. The US and the EU couldn't freeze all of Russia's foreign exchange reserves. In fact, a chunk of its reserves, about $120 billion or so, lay somewhere here in this bustling street, inside a vault that pretty much nobody knows about. Here, the Russian central bank holds about $100 billion worth of reserves in the form of gold. And this gold, nobody could get their hands on it. And while Russia was effectively barred from transacting in most international markets, they used gold as a mode of payment to bypass these sanctions. Gold helped the economy stay afloat. And this obsession with gold soon spread from Russia to China to India and most emerging economies. Between July and September 2022, central banks across the world bought nearly 400 tons of gold on a net basis. In fact, if you tally the data for the entire year until that date, you'd have seen that central banks bought more gold than they ever did since 1967. Turkey bought nearly 30 tons, Uzbekistan bought nearly 25 tons, India bought nearly 17 tons, and the remaining 300 odd tons most likely went to China. So you have to ask, why are central banks suddenly obsessing over gold and why is China leading the pack? Well, put yourself in China's shoes right now. The US hates you. The European Union doesn't particularly like you, and yet you have to do most of your business with these countries using their currency, mostly the dollar. So if one day the US decides to impose sanctions on you for whatever reason, they can effectively lock you out of your own foreign exchange reserves held in financial institutions across Europe and the US. And this would be catastrophic, and countries like China and Turkey have recognized this problem. This explains why China, for instance, has added nearly 900 tons worth of gold to its bullion. In 2022, their reserves in gold crossed the 2,000 ton mark for the first time ever. And it's likely that they'll keep adding more gold to their reserves so long as they can buy it for cheap. Wait, what? Cheap? How are they buying it for cheap, especially when gold prices are rallying? How come they're getting a discount? Well, to understand that, you have to look somewhere else. But before I answer that question and explain how all of this is connected to the gold rally, you will have to let me take a small break. Almost every household in this country invests in gold in one form or another to protect against life's uncertainties. And yet, only 3 in 10 urban Indians have a term life insurance policy, which perhaps protects against life's biggest uncertainty. It is quite literally a lifesaver. And for just 10,000 rupees or so, you could have a life cover of nearly 1 crore. And yet people don't invest their resources in this. So my opinion is that if you are on your financial journey, which I expect most of my subscribers are, you should probably consider buying a term life insurance policy before you do anything else. And if you need any help on that matter, you can talk to the advisors at Ditto Insurance. That's the startup that I co-founded in 2021, and we have some of the best advisors out there. In fact, IRDAI certified advisors who've already talked to nearly 150,000 people, advise them on how to go about buying insurance. So if you need any help on that front, please feel free to check the link in the description, and yeah, we'll take care of the rest. Just book a call and we'll have you sorted. And with that out of the way, let's get back to the video, shall we? So how on earth is China buying all of this gold, and how are they getting it cheap? Well, you'll have to look at Russia. Russia is the second largest producer of gold in the world, and their gold mining industry is a pillar of their economy. Unfortunately, since the sanctions, the industry hasn't been able to sell gold to their usual trading partners, countries like Switzerland, for instance, which means they've had to push that gold elsewhere. So if Russia has a trading line open with countries like China and India, it's most likely that they sold gold at a discount to these countries, which explains why most of these countries are lapping up gold at a pace that belies most expectations. And gold is gold. If countries could somehow store it securely in their vaults, then they always know that they'll have a lifeline if Western countries decide to impose arbitrary sanctions. And this brings me back to my final point. How is all of this related to the gold price rally? See, when you look at demand for gold and you tally the central bank purchases for gold in the years 2021 and 2022, you'll see that the only reason the demand for gold went up is because central banks decided to purchase more gold than they ever did. If you remove those purchases, you'd see that the demand for gold would have actually dipped, which means that central banks are actually one of the prime drivers of gold rally at this very moment. And the thing about central banks is that once they buy gold, they don't easily sell it. I mean, look at this graph. This graph tells you that central banks as a group across the world became net buyers in the year 2010. And since then, they've remained net buyers, meaning as a group, they've bought more gold than they have sold. And if they continue to hold it, which is what they've been doing for the past decade, you'll see that they alone can offer a support price for gold. If they don't sell and everything else remains constant, it's likely that gold prices will keep going up. And this not only explains the current gold rally to a large extent, it also explains what could pan out in the future. If central banks keep buying gold as they've been doing for the past 1 year, it's likely that the gold price will keep going up. If for some reason they chose to change course, then it's likely that the rally will also lose steam. So this is an important consideration for you. Now, will they keep doing it? Well, that's a tough question to answer. But what I can tell you is this. Right now, there are two major trends panning out. The first one is that most people expect a recession to hit sometime during the year or perhaps early next year. And if the uncertainty persists, it's likely that gold will remain a very attractive option among investors and central banks, especially considering that inflation has still remained elevated in most parts of the global economy. There's also the fact that people and businesses are now fed up of the US and the kind of influence the US dollar wields in their lives. They want an alternative. In fact, only recently Mr. Uday Kotak called the US dollar a financial terrorist.
I genuinely feel the biggest financial terrorist in the world is the US dollar. All our monies are in Nostro account, and somebody in the US can say you cannot withdraw it from tomorrow morning and you're stuck. That is the power of the reserve currency.
And while he backtracked soon enough, it's kind of easy to see the sentiment boiling here. They want an alternative, they want another option, and gold is a good contender. And put together, you can kind of see why gold prices are rallying. The only risks, well, perhaps you have to consider that interest rates have been on the rise. Now, most people expect gold prices to start dipping the moment interest rates go up. Now, why is this the case? Well, take the example of a piece of gold that's probably lying somewhere in your storage locker back at your place. And now, while it's sitting there, it doesn't yield an interest. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. Instead, if you took that money and invested it in a savings account or a fixed deposit, you'll be entitled to an interest. And as interest rates keep going up, you're likely to earn more and more money, which means gold becomes an inferior investment option. So it's likely that some people will choose to shift their investment from gold to actual cash and through it fixed deposits and savings account, etc. Now, studies that have looked into this relationship haven't come out with anything conclusive, but it's something that people believe, and I thought maybe I should just touch upon that. There's also another risk in that gold prices are usually extremely hard to predict. No matter what you do, what kind of advice you take, what investment professionals you hear, it's incredibly hard to precisely know where gold prices are headed. So in general, if you're betting on gold, you should know that it's very possible that your predictions will fall flat one way or another. But in any case, I hope that this video was useful and you learned something about gold and why gold prices have been rallying in the past year or so. And if you did like the video, don't forget to leave your comments and feedback if you have any, and also actually like the video and subscribe to this channel for more such content. And with that, I'll probably see you next week. Bye and have a nice day.